My best for college football is, I got a couple, but the one that stood out to me the most, and we've had some great games, is the non-opt-outs. And again, if you want to opt out, I will never get mad at you for making, in my opinion, what is a smart business decision. But I will applaud the guys who decide to play. Bryce Young, Will Anderson. Emmanuel Forbes from Mississippi State has 6 pick sixes in his career and is about to get absolutely breaded up like he just walked into a bakery. But he went out there and played against Illinois. I know you had Coach Leach and doing all that stuff, but when they asked him, why did he play? He said, because his family's motto is we finish what we start. So I want to take my hat off to the guys that decided to play in the bowl games with NFL aspirations, or even guys coming back next year that are expected to be a big part of the team that decided to play in the quote-unquote meaningless bowl game. But I do not want to use that as an opportunity to slander the guys who didn't play, because it was a smart business decision in my opinion. So I thought that, you look at the way that Bryce and them played against Kansas State, made that game a lot more interesting, made it a lot tougher on Kansas State. But you saw instances of guys going out there and playing when they could have opted out. I want to tip my hat to those guys. But in the same vein, I don't think that's a knock. And I wouldn't use that if I was a scout 100% against downgrading a guy's, character or want for the team because he didn't play in the Real Care Meineke Car Care Bowl.
And I don't think it will.
Yeah,
the NFL execs are looking at these guys for so long in advance now. It's not just those last couple of games. Even though I do think the Senior Bowl is fantastic in helping some guys get a look who aren't necessarily at the very tip top of the NFL draft boards. But now I agree with you. I don't think it'll hurt those guys. But how fantastic is it to see? We're just talking about Bryce Young, right? So let's just talk about him. I don't know what his future is. He may go on to be a Super Bowl champion. He may go on to be a guy who plays on a couple contracts, right? Has a few good NFL seasons, moves on with his life, and is exceptional at whatever he does next. He will always be one of the best quarterbacks in Alabama history, and he will always be someone who played in the Sugar Bowl and threw 5 touchdown passes.
Went out the right way, and I do want to say this too, Blaine. While it may not be a knock against some guys who didn't play, I do think it's a nice little feather in the cap, and maybe the thing that puts somebody over that. Maybe it's what takes the Texans to say, you know what? I want to get Bryce Young because he's that type of. Maybe that's that little detail that helps make that decision. So it can help you. I don't think it can hurt you, but I want to tip my hat.
Well, especially at the quarterback position. Because what do you look at the quarterback position? You're looking for leadership, right? I've been always one of these type of guys. I never had the chance to go play in the NFL or something like that. But if you can play, you play, right? Yeah. If you can play, you get your ass out there and you play. I won't knock you for not doing it for a bowl game just because of the future of yourself and your family and stuff like that. But for the guys who can, it just sets a great bar that Bryce and Will Anderson, what they did to go out there for other guys. For other guys, you know what? Even if you're not playing a bunch of snaps, even if you're not, Will Anderson wasn't out there a bunch of snaps. I saw Will Anderson mostly out there, on third downs to pass rush, which is fine. Just the presence of you being on the field, and it shows the younger guys too. And that's why I said kudos to Nick Saban. You have 2 top 5 picks out there playing in a bowl game against Kansas State. Yep. And for the younger guys, especially with the talent that Bama has, looking up to guys like that, saying, well, you know what? Well, my junior and my senior, if I'm going to go out there and play. Because first of all, you're ending the year with your brothers. You know what I'm saying? You're ending the year with your brothers. So I won't knock you for not doing it because I understand it financially, but you should get somewhat of an incentive for going out there and playing.
Well, Will Anderson, I thought, said it best. I asked him why he played, and he said, because I don't want to be a hypocrite. He said, all I've done is tell all these guys, the team. It's about the team. And I think, again, it shows you the type men that are being produced. And when you mix those type of people with that type of talent, you see why Alabama has done what Alabama has done under Nick Saban. You see what's really at the heart of the blueprint. It's the people. That's what the heart of the blueprint is. All the structure and the resources and all that stuff is nothing but an appetizer waiting on the entree of having the right people in this type sport to be able to win. Now, another one of my best, I want to make sure and give a shout out to Willie Fritz and Mike Elko, who I think did the best coaching jobs out of anybody. Throw Jim Moore Jr. in there as well, beginning UConn. But guys, Tulane won 2 games last year. Now, I have personally got my ass kicked by Willie Fritz and Georgia Southern there in Statesboro when we went and played them. I know about what he can do from an offensive standpoint. I know he's evolved. I thought that was an absolutely unbelievable year and turnaround from Chris Pratt. Think about some of the games they won. They go on the road and beat Kansas State. You have that bad loss in the middle of the year that if we're talking about maybe college football playoff teams, Tulane could have got in there. And after seeing what they did against USC, I don't think they really could have stopped anybody, but they could have scored some points with some guys they have on that offense and the quarterback they had behind there. Then Mike Elko at Duke, ACC Coach of the Year and well-deserved. You knew that David Cutcliffe was going to help make the right decision to find the person to replace him, and boy, did they. And if you look at Mike, he comes off as kind of a hardened guy, but if you knew him and knew the way the players felt about him, he is such a great fit for Duke. I think is a perfect fit. I want to make sure I give kudos to those guys. Unbelievable year from Duke, and what a way to end it there at the end of the season. So those are my best. My worst, any individual who had to watch the Iowa versus Kentucky game, okay? And again, I think Iowa, they're obviously making changes. You look at Cade McNamara coming over from Michigan, but good Lord, Kentucky on offense. I thought it was going to be bad with Eddie Grant. I thought it was bad with Eddie Grant, and it was. You basically got in the time machine. I know they didn't have, Liam Cohen had no personnel to work with, especially at quarterback. Devin Leary's coming in. Don't panic, Kentucky fans. But goodness gracious, that game was just absolutely wild from an unbelievably disgusting standpoint to watch. And I'm a defensive guy. Iowa did get the 2 pick six, but man, I got worse watching that. And then targeting. I'm going to continue to say this. I will die on this hill. If you really cared about player safety, you would call targeting on offense, number one. But how the referee throws the flag in the Kansas-Arkansas game when the quarterback for Kansas is trying to get into the end zone with the 2-point conversion to tie the game and goes low to try and get in. Just the audacity to throw that flag. If review wants to buzz in and say, hey, it's targeting, we need to look at it, that's one thing. But that official, you're one of the worst. Please never talk to me or look me in the eyes again. I do know who you are. But the fact that we do not call targeting on offensive players for lowering their helmet absolutely destroys the narrative of it's just about player safety. Because, again, that's like saying, all right, well, if you drive on the left side of the road, you can't do this, but if you drive on the right side of the road, you can do it. They're equally dangerous, but we don't punish one person for doing it, and we'll punish, not only will we punish the person who does it, we're going to throw you out of the game. And better yet, if it's the last game of the year and it's in the second half, you got to sit out the first half of the first game next year, which could be a huge game. Don't give me player safety under the guise of player safety when you don't call it against the offense, because it's the same action, it's the same motion. And let me give you a little hint. Most targeting, you want to know why it happens? It's because the offensive player lowers himself first and the defensive player reacts to it. So that's my worst. I'm going to continue to scream it. And look, I'll just Harvey Milk this whole thing when it comes to targeting.
I thought the 2 pick sixes in the Iowa game you were talking about were going to blow the under. But it didn't.
Oh.
Did you have it too?
Oh, no, Blaine had the over at what?
21 and a half.
21 and a half.
You see that Iowa last drive?
You had the over at 21 and a half.
I had the over at 21 and a half and one bet and the under 38.
21-0 at halftime.
I know, because Baby Cone had the under at 27 and a half.
We can't score 3 points in a 4-quarter football game.
It's bad.
It's bad. And then what hurt the most was the last drive. I was trying to go score.
At the
last
end.
drive.
Yes.
Wide open kid.
Overthrows. Oh, I didn't know you were begging for that to be caught. I was begging for it to be not caught.
I was watching
Kentucky turns into the best defense in the nation the last drive, of course.
Why were they throwing the ball that late? I know the announcer was like, they're trying to work on some things. Man, in the game.
I think because Brian Ferentz wants to be like, see? Told you it worked. We're right now we're batting 1,000 in January. But no, that Utah scoring late last night, I had the over 50 to finish the 3-leg parlay. It was at 49. I am not gonna lie, I cussed out James Franklin in my living room. That's what Reed was doing a puzzle and to tell me to stop.
I might as well add them to my best too. I mean, so much for Penn State not winning any big games.
Dude, huge. Yeah,
I know it's back-to-back seasons with Cam Rising going out of the Rose Bowl, and Utah is just a fantastic football team. But I told you guys, this Penn State team, look, there's 2 losses to Michigan and OSU, right? But they were beating the teams that they were supposed to beat in the Big Ten, and it's a great Rose Bowl.
Yeah, I was happy for Sean Clifford in year 27, ended on the right note.
Broke every Penn State passing record.
Well, it's owned year for 8 years.
And wins, I think.
Yeah, I think he tied. I think he's tied for the most wins in the history.
With McSorley.
With Trace McSorley, Blaine's favorite quarterback.
Well, out of everything great, man, a great bowl season, I have to say the Peach Bowl. Probably my best, the Peach Bowl. The Georgia Bulldogs now undefeated season. What are they? 28-1. the last 2 seasons, something like that. Going back to another national championship, the job that Kirby Smart has done with this team has been phenomenal. With Stetson Bennett at quarterback, Heisman Trophy finalists when they needed it most, they figured out a way. But mostly, man, I want to talk about the Buckeyes. I mean, they went in there and put on a show and a fight that made me proud to watch it. I mean, it was unbelievable. For 3 weeks, they had heard this team isn't physical enough to play with Georgia. This team's going to get blown out. I think they took that to heart. They went in there, and this kid, C.J. Stroud, Blaine, you and I were talking about this the other day. C.J. Stroud is a stand-up guy, an exceptional human being, and he's a hell of a ball player, man. And when you get up to the podium, I've seen several losses now, at least 2 that he's had when he's gotten up to the podium, and the first thing he wants to do is thank Jesus Christ and to put his teammates forward. Not even the football game necessarily is at the forefront of his attention. I think he is going to be a good NFL quarterback, and I loved watching him play. They put on a heck of a fight and came up just short.
Yeah, what are the 2 things that TCU and Ohio State had in common? The whole break, what were people saying? You're not physical enough.
Yeah.
Which is basically saying you're weak.
Mm-hmm.
You're weak. You're not strong enough. You're not tough enough. You're not man enough to go in there and go toe-to-toe with you. You just don't have it in you. And what that does, I've been on both sides of the coin, and we all have. I've been on teams that are supposed to go in there and win because you should be tougher, and teams that were underdogs going in there and having a fight. Maybe you're a little bit undersized. Maybe you're a little bit slower. Maybe you're not as talented. But those are the 2 things they had in common. There's nothing more motivating to a human being, but especially an 18 to 22-year-old male, than to be told that you are basically a beta about to go play a bunch of alphas. All the greatest stories we hear about wars, right, where the underdog won. What was always the thing? Oh, you're outnumbered. Or you're not good enough at this. You're not a good enough warrior. You don't have a good enough army. You don't have good enough leadership. The way that brings teams together to be able to take their play, not only from an execution standpoint, but to a physicality standpoint, it is a mental game. That's the reason it's funny. That's the reason I picked TCU to beat Michigan. But I thought Georgia was just going to be way too much. And if you look at the way that game started and some of those, the kind of way it went through with what Georgia's offensive line did to Ohio State's front 7 a couple times, you could see flashes of it. But you could also see that in the TCU-Michigan game, guys. First play, Michigan lines up and ran what? Inside zone?
ISO.
I ran ISO for 60. I looked at Reed and was like, I'm starting to really worry instantly about my Michigan pick, and I know we'll get more in the game. But when you tell somebody that they are a beta to go in and playing a bunch of alphas, it is so unbelievably motivating. If you're at home, if you're in the car, if you're at the house, how many times, whether it's in jobs or whether it's in relationships or whether it's in parenting or anything like that, have you been told you weren't good enough to do something? And how did that motivate you? Oh, you're from a family that's never done anything or comes from a bad socioeconomic background, or your dad was an alcoholic, or your mom was an alcoholic. You'll never be anything. How does that motivate a human being? That, to me, is the ultimate motivation, and you saw the way that 2 teams were able to use it. And I'm with you. I thought Ohio State gave us a hell of a game. You gave us a hell of a game. And I feel horrible for the kid, that kick at the end. He's been great all year. That's a long kick. That is a tough kick. You're expected to make it. But just for Ohio State, and I know this doesn't make their fan base feel better, and that I know what the standard is at Ohio State. But I think if you were kind of questioning Ryan Day a little bit, this should give you a lot of solace in the coach that you have, because he was able to not only motivate, goodness gracious, did they call a game on that.
Yeah. Now, Blaine, Jim Knowles certainly has a lot to fix on that Buckeyes defense. It's not the kind of defense I've grown accustomed to seeing from them, especially with these last 2 losses they've had. But they're a play away from playing in the national championship. I think that they deservedly, were in that situation. What do you think?
No, I agree. That's kind of one of my bets, too. The playoff committee, they got it right.
They did.
Right? They got it right. TCU deserved to be there, and we saw that. Ohio State deserved to be there, and they saw that. One thing about Ohio State that stood out to me the most, their offensive line whipped Georgia's ass for about 3 quarters of that game.
They really did.
Whipped their ass, and that was my biggest question. It wasn't like I'm not worried about the receivers for Ohio State, good as anybody in the nation. The defense, it got players all over the field. Can you hang with Georgia up front? And you saw that, and even when they didn't, CJ did what? Moved well in the pocket. Marvin Harrison Jr. is going to be an absolute problem.
He's the best player in college football.
An absolute problem in the league. Ohio State proved to everybody. Hell, even proved it to Michigan, right? They can play, all right, when it comes down to it. And the big thing with me is still C.J. Stroud is questioning in big games, will C.J. Stroud show up? C.J. did more than show up. He showed a Heisman-winning performance. I know he didn't win the Heisman. I know Caleb won it. He showed a guy who's good enough to win the Heisman. And it doesn't come down to a kick, all right? I know that's what it came down to, but it's never one play in a football game, all right? To go ask the kid who already banged a 49-yarder a couple drives before that, to go ask him the last play hit a field goal, stuff like that happens. But it comes down to more one play in the football game. But Ohio State, if you're a fan, if you're a player, if you're a coach, if you're somewhat associated with Ohio State, no way you should leave that stadium or that field with your head down after that performance against a Georgia team that's clearly head over heels, was supposed to be better than everybody.
Yeah, and people will say, oh, well, Alabama should have been in there after what they did to K-State.
No, they shouldn't.
Here's the way this works. There can be differences in the 4 best teams and the 4 most deserving teams. There is some gray area there. You know how you fix that? Expand the playoff. So we're going to get it. People will make that argument about Alabama. Alabama was a great team, but you lost twice in the regular season. Mm-hmm. You didn't win your division. You didn't win your conference. I know Ohio State didn't win their division. I know they didn't win their conference, but they had one loss, and that was to the team that did win their division and did win their conference and went undefeated, and that was to Michigan. You can't lose to LSU. You can't lose to Tennessee. But now that we're going to go to the expanded playoff, and I don't know how, if you're an anti-expanded playoff person, I can understand saying, all right, well, maybe 12's too much. There's not 12 teams that can win a national championship. We know that. But after watching those games, after watching Tulane, USC, hell, after watching Oklahoma, Florida State, how can you not sit here and say, you know what, we do need to expand it, even if it's by a little bit. Maybe 12 is a little bit too much. I think it should have been at 8. But man, we got some great games.
There's never even been 4.
I'm with you.
Not more than 4. There's never even been 4.
I'm with you, David.
Really win a national championship. And I think this year was the first year you could say, like, man, that parity across those top 4, 5, 6, maybe even teams is unbelievable. Maybe we'll get to a point where there's 12.
Well, do you think this year was the anomaly to you? It's hard to me to think it was a coincidence with the transfer portal and NIL coming out at the same time, and then all of a sudden we have this newfound parity in those kind of lower class teams moving up to the middle class, some middle class teams being able to fight up in the elite tier. I hope it's not an anomaly.
I think we'll continue to see it, and I think part of it too was just Alabama's dominance for the last decade too, which contributed to that, which I don't think is going to carry on forever. So I don't know if we'll ever see a situation where 12 teams can legitimately win the football national championship, but maybe we will see 8, maybe we will see 9. I'll go ahead and take Michigan for my worst. It was, first of all credit to TCU. What Sonny Dykes has done in year 1 has just been absolutely phenomenal. I know Blaine's going to get into it a little bit more. It really is just miraculous, and it was a fantastic football game. The emotions were high in the Cone household for sure, but when you remove yourself, man, it really just delivered as just a wonderful football game. I believe Michigan and TCU play 10 times. I think Michigan wins the football game more times than they lose.
At least 7, David.
I don't think they win 10 times, right? I mean, obviously, we've seen that.
At least 7 out of 10.
I do think they win more times than they lose, which to me points to a little bit that Michigan overlooked this team. Now, part of the pushback I've gotten on that is, well, with a month to prepare, you never look past a team when it's the semifinal. And I disagree on that, because I do think that Michigan, half of the mistakes they made were some that we've characteristically seen this season, not being able to finish in red zone, relying on field goals too much. But most of the mistakes that Michigan made in this game were uncharacteristic. So 2 pick sixes, turnovers from J.J. McCarthy, who's had a 74% completion percentage this season. Penalties, bad penalties at the wrong time. And mostly they got beat at their own identity, which is what you were saying. They went in and said, we're obviously going to be the most physical team. With J.J. McCarthy saying, if TCU stays in a 3-3-5, we're going to run the ball over.
Say that?
Why are you doing that? Why would you ever say that? And just to Jake's point, a TCU team said, you know what? Not only are we going to beat you, we're going to beat you at your own identity, which is part of the reason that I think Michigan partly overlooked this team. But I could be wrong. TCU, I mean, they were the better team that day. Maybe they're just the better team overall. They're going to go play in the national championship, and they have an opportunity to shock the world against Georgia. Again, 3 facts real quick on Michigan. 13 wins this season. More wins than any team in program history. They beat their biggest rival 2 years in a row, back-to-back Big Ten champions. That is significant, man. That cannot just be looked at. That is very, very impressive. And you look at some of these players coming back, they have a chance to do something serious next season. Next fact. Jim Harbaugh's lost 6 straight bowl games. This is the other side of that. Hasn't won a bowl game since his first year at Michigan. Even when you look to the NFL, being able to win several NFC championships with the 49ers, but not the Super Bowl when he made it against the Ravens. So does that point to some sort of, inability to win the big one? I just refuse to believe that Jim Harbaugh's incapable of winning big games or gets nervous, but it does speak to some sort of preparation issue when you're talking about, you have a month to prepare for a bowl game. And then the third fact, and lastly, Jim Harbaugh will be courted by NFL teams this offseason. We already saw the report yesterday.
He's visiting him on signing day.
The obligatory Jim Harbaugh to the NFL team.
He went to meet his mistress on your anniversary.
It came earlier than we expected yesterday. So look, it's always going to happen because Jim Harbaugh is one of those few coaches who's proven to have success at both levels. What Jim Harbaugh will do moving forward, only he knows. Only knows what his goals are. The reason this time feels different to me is because he was so adamant this past contract extension that he is going to be and wants to be the head coach at the University of Michigan moving forward. J.J. McCarthy, his quarterback, will be a junior next year. Donovan Edwards, his running back, will be a junior next year. He just signed the #1 class in the transfer portal entering next season. I don't know what he's going to do. He has an opportunity to piggyback off of this recent success, but also still have a chip on his shoulder for people who are saying he can't win the big one. Let's see if he comes back and does it.
Yeah, and the month off to prep, it's so much different than, everybody's like, oh, you can't beat Ohio State. Oh, you can't beat Ohio State. Well, that's a 1-week prep game or 2-week max if you have a bye week. It's so different prep-wise, preparing for a bowl game. It's such a different element. I do think he needs to look at his preparation. But I will say, if I told Michigan fans 2 years ago, right after they lost to Ohio State, oh, hey, by the way, you guys are going to make the playoff the next 2 years. You're going to beat Ohio State the next 2 years. You're going to win the Big Ten the next 2 years. You're going to fall a little bit short, but you have a lot of guys coming back in year 3. They would have taken it in spades, in droves. It wasn't even close. I do think Harbaugh stays.
You think?
I think he stays. I think now he has the leverage. What is more, these guys all feed off ego. We know that you have to be able to operate this. He went from being the guy that was living off his name that was about to get fired to now you have the leverage. Now you just won more games than any Michigan program has ever won, and Michigan is back. Michigan is back to where they believe they belong. And it is where they belong. Michigan is a blue blood. It's great for the game. I will also say, I tell you what, on Saturday, it about went from the highest highs to the lowest lows real quick if you're a Michigan fan. Because you went from beating Ohio State, making the playoff as a 2 seed, going undefeated, to losing to TCU and about to watch Ohio State go play TCU, which is very beatable, a lot more beatable than let's say Michigan was, in my opinion, if they were to play them again in the national championship and totally flip the script of where Ryan Day and Harbaugh was. You averted that disaster. But if you're a Michigan fan and you're upset, I understand that. I get that, but goodness, you got to be a lot happier with where you're at than where you were.
Well, this is the thing. I don't think, as if Harbaugh being this guy, this great coach, that they're going to overlook TCU in any type of way. Why would you? One, you have 28 days. 28 days to know who your opponent is since that Purdue game's ended. All right? Last year was about what? Beating Ohio State. This year was about what? Winning a championship. A championship team doesn't look past the one team they got to beat to get there. And David, we talked about this earlier. Before this game started, I would have took Michigan 7 out of 10 times. I would have. After I watched this game, I think it's a split right down the middle. Hold on. I think it's a split right down the middle. Because what is TCU built on their defense, right? They're going to bend, right? They're going to bend, but they did what in the red zone? They played well. I mean, you're up 21-6 at halftime. Got a 4th down and goal stop at the beginning of the game. They have an NFL quarterback. I think Max will play in the NFL. They have an NFL running back. They have 2 NFL tackles. They have 2 NFL receivers. And their defense are a bunch of scrappy older guys, right? And the thing with Michigan, right? You're Donovan Edwards' dog. Offensive line, great. Phenomenal receivers, right? JJ's still a young cat, right? This is the first time he ever been in a game like this, in a semi-game that matters this much. I know Ohio State matter. I know rival game matter, but this is different, right? And the risk and reward with JJ, right? He can make great plays, huge plays. We see him, I saw him roll out 30 yards behind and wrap the sidelines and almost scored, right? But there's a risk with that, right? There's a risk for your reward with guys like this, all right? And those pick sixes were on him to a T. That out was on him. Next one, look through a guy. The same guy who had the hell of a game, I can't remember the outside linebacker's name, had a hell of a game. Captain of the defense, pick 6. These are the games you play, right? Physicality, I get it, but that threw T5, right?
Triple option of defense.
Right?
That's what it is.
It's tough to deal with. It's tough to deal with. I feel like if these teams played out of 10 times, the thing about TCU on offense is what? One, they know how to spread you out, right? Two, they mix tempos. How many times has the defense of Michigan seen that in the Big Ten? How many times? Purdue, maybe, right? Don't really mix tempos that much. Ohio State, right? They don't see stuff like that, right? We're going right now, right? You could tell. Hell, the defense was tired in the first half.
Yeah. Let's just think about the breaks and they made their own breaks. But how many times out of a 10-game set is Michigan going to fumble the handoff at the half-yard line? How many times in a 10-game set is Michigan going to call a trick play inside the 5 after you just smashed it all the way going down there? I think a lot of breaks fell TCU's way, but that's why they play the game. That's why they play the game. It is one game. You get one first quarter, one second quarter, one third quarter, and one fourth quarter. And TCU, when you run that style of defense, that's why people look at Iowa State and they're like, how is Iowa State giving up like 18 points a game? That 3-3-5, it is the anomaly. It's the look you don't really get, right? Whenever you're playing a triple option team. Well, we got to prepare for it because we don't see it. We got to get used to doing it. We take a week in the offseason to work and get better at it. That's why everybody was saying, oh, this 3-3-5 against Michigan's never going to work with the way they run the ball. I'm going to tell you something about the 3-3-5, and I'm going to tell you why it works. Number one, if you got a nose that zero's a dog, you can blow up a lot from the inside out quickly. Well, why do you think that teams that run it typically have that anchor at nose that is able to stop everything? Second thing, you don't know where guys are going. Like you line up in an overfront, I got a pretty good idea, even if you stunt, where you're going. Or if you do stunt, the couple options you have. In the 3-3-5, you may drop a guy out of a helicopter coming straight from the Namibian coast. I don't know. You can send blitzers from everywhere. It is hard as a quarterback to predetermine, and I'm talking about in the pass game too, where guys are going to be. That's why I think you saw J.J. McCarthy looking through people on that pick six on the out. He never saw the guy because he thought he was coming, right? So I feel like when you're playing in a one-game winner-take-all situation, it's like in the NCAA tournament.
Yeah.
When you're playing one of those teams that just holds the ball the whole time. Or they just run what? Backdoor cuts, backdoor cuts, backdoor cuts, backdoor cuts the whole time. And you look up and you're like, how in God's name is Loyola Chicago going to the Final Four? Like and you add that with the old scrappy guys, I believe you there, but I legitimately think Michigan beats TCU 7 out of 10 times. But guess what? Their ass ain't playing 10 times.
Yep.
They played one time and it was on Saturday, and it's win and advance. It's survive and thrive. It's your one opportunity to go get it, and it's how the breaks fell.
Everything frustrating in that game. When you look at the reverse call on the touchdown pass, the fumble on the very next play, the reverse pass call on fourth and
The wrong
2.
spot, David, on the touchdown to
that
Roman
one
Wilson.
on the wrong spot,
How
2 yards
crazy
further
was
back,
that?
2 yards further back. Playing cover 0 on 3rd and 8 and letting their best player score an 80-yard touchdown
Ohio
after
State
you just
did.
beat the Buckeyes. Doing this. Out of everything that was frustrating,
I thought about you in that.
the thing that was most frustrating was not using J.J. McCarthy's legs for the first 2 quarters in 14 minutes. No Q power, no zone read. 0 times did he pull the zone read after we kept getting blown up in the backfield time and time again. Then with 1 minute remaining in the third quarter, J.J. McCarthy has an excellent scramble around the weak side of the defense. Picks up like 18 yards, 20 yards, something like that. Then it was like a light bulb went off. Wait, we can use J.J.'s legs.
Yeah.
The next play was a quarterback counter. Was a quarterback counter with the guard and the tackle leading that led to the touchdown. Then we started actually trying, and then the 2-point conversion attempt that we failed on was another quarterback design. I'm like, man, we could have been doing this for the entire first 3.
Who's that on, Dave?
Do what?
That's on coaching.
No, I get it. No, and
What's that? It has to be something. It has to be something with Harbaugh in the postseason.
I get it. And maybe you're right, Blaine. Maybe TCU wins more times out of 10 than they lose. Maybe you're right. I just, I don't know. I got a feeling that, just like you said, I think that there were some mistakes that were made.
Well,
I think look, when you're looking at, when the narrative is you're going to roll over TCU, you're already in the final. People are already booking their flights to LA. I had people calling me, former teammates, where are you staying in LA when you get? We're going to get a rematch with Georgia or a rematch with our biggest rival. When that's the narrative, that's why I told you guys on the Friday before, I said those teams do not exist for you. And I just feel like they look past.
And let's not give Michigan's defense a pass either. It was terrible execution. You're running just shallow crossers. Quentin Johnson just takes and it's gone for 80 yards.
Oh, yeah.
I hadn't seen Michigan play like that on defense.
It started with their first touchdown, I believe, right? Was a shallow cross. You brought everybody, and then you go later, it's 3rd and 7 on the 80-yard touchdown. But you say the same thing about TCU. Max Duck, both his picks were tip balls. Well, two of them, both of them were drops from the receivers that Michigan picked off. So I think that you can go either way on people missing out on things. It's just the way sooner or later, both teams had unlucky bounces.
YouTube, what is up? It's me, Jake. That's David, and that's my brother Blaine. We want you to subscribe. It's 2023, the year of Crane & Company, the year of the dragon, and the year of violence. So subscribe.